Teachers of Reddit, what is the greatest way a student has misinterpreted one of your assignments? Friend of mine had an assignment in his photography class to take unusual photos of usual things, as he told it. All the other students got the gist and took unusual perspective photos, pictures through water droplets, etc. He hiked up to an overlook spot that was an old military outpost, and took pictures of his cat, whom he had carried up there. The teacher was amused, nonetheless. I know this trail. It's like a 3-mile hike? And your cat was cool with that? From some reason this has made me cry laughing. I'm in bed shaking with laughter, trying not to wake the wife. All I can picture is a cat on a cliff pulling an expression like, "What the fuck is this shit? Where the fuck am I?" I can just picture him, cat slung under one arm and camera in the other, huffing his way up the trail. Cat, meow? Him, shut up kitty, this is for a project. Way back in high school, my teacher told us this story. Several years earlier, he'd been teaching an English class and a paper was due. He reminded his students to make the titles of their papers interesting. Sure enough, he received a paper entitled, Teenage Ninja Sluts from Hell. The body of the paper was perfectly appropriate and academic. He subsequently reminded students to make their titles interesting and relevant to the subject matter within. Next paper. You will never expect what the Spanish Inquisition was about. Open to find out more. You won't believe how clickbait was born. In college we had to give presentations that were taped and sent in to be graded, to make sure we were learning how to use technology in the classroom and public speaking. One of the guidelines was to get the audience's attention at the start and be interesting. One of the guys got up, took out body spray and a lighter, did a brief flamethrower, sprayed a quick blast at the flame, calmly put it away, and then gave his presentation. I don't know how the graders reacted, but the class was highly amused. I was the student, unfortunately. Took an intro to theater class in college. The professor randomly assigned us theater-related topics and dates for individual presentations. I knew I'd be absent on my assigned date, so he asked me to switch dates and topics with another student. One student agreed to switch with me, and when I asked for his topic he says, minstrel theater. Only I wasn't yet familiar with the word minstrel, so I thought he said menstrual, as in menstruation. I thought the topic odd, but who was I to know? I knew little of theater, and for all I knew there was an entire genre of plays about menstruation. So I put the project off until literally the morning of the presentation. It was a 10-minute oral presentation with no sources required, so I figured I'd do a quick Wikipedia read and memorize a little speech in no time. Only there was no Wikipedia page on menstrual theater. I dismissed it, thinking the genre hadn't quite taken off enough to earn a Wikipedia page, and moved to a Google search on menstrual theater. I was surprised to find very little on the subject. My most common results were references to the vagina monologues, which wasn't great, but it was something. Now I'm 15 minutes before class and I've got nothing on my subject except a lot of reviews and articles on the vagina monologues. I suck it up and write the presentation. My name is called to the front of the class and I announce my presentation on menstrual theater. The most famous play in menstrual theater today is probably the vagina monologues. I begin, and I notice my professor looks horrified already, but I continue. I summarize TVM and still have 5 minutes left, so I go into speech about the importance of menstrual theater to women's rights for obvious reasons. I finish and sit down, and the professor walks silently and confused to the front of the room. Your topic was minstrel theater, he says. Right. Then why in God's name did you spend your entire presentation talking about the vagina monologues and women's rights? I'm turning red and the whole class is looking at me, and I say, it was a tough topic. That was the only play I could find that mentioned anything about menstruation. The professor was silent for a moment, then it clicked, and he burst into level crazy person laugh. Pretty sure he talks about me to students to this day. I am that guy. In a very embarrassing context. I am a teacher, but this story was from when I was a student. In debate class we had to debate euthanasia. The kid who was supposed to argue for it went first. He started talking about how necessary it was, and how terrible it was that we didn't use it more before. He was giving all these examples of people that needed to be euthanized, people who needed amputations, people with cavities, babies. It became very clear very quickly that either this kid was a monster or he was talking about something else. The teacher asked him, "Charles, are you talking about euthanasia or anesthesia?" The kid replied, "I have made a terrible mistake." I still quote that to this day. Cracks me up every time. For a professional writing class, I had an assignment where I had students set up a professional website using Wix. The point was to show them how easy doing that, and then spending a small amount of money to host it under your own URL, which I didn't require. I just showed them the steps, would give you a professional-looking website. One of my students somehow got it in his head that the website was supposed to be a fictional project and not actually about them, so he made a professional website for a cat named Mittens, including a fake professional profile and resume. Skills include laying in the sun and knocking things off of countertops. He was really embarrassed when I told him that the website was supposed to be about his professional experience. The important question is, did you hire Mittens? Because his resume sounded very impressive. Had to fire him for spending too much time trying to catch the red dot. Not a teacher, but in my computer science class we were learning about making graphics in Java, and we were told to try to make a checkerboard pattern. A student who doesn't pay much attention, but is great at coding, only heard the checkers part. He goes off to research on his own how to make a full checkers game, and turns it in. He asked why he had us do all of that learning and coding by ourselves. Needless to say, he was a little grumpy when he found out it was just supposed to just be the pattern. The checkers game worked well though. Well, if he made a game of checkers, then I'm assuming he also made the checkerboard. So, technically he did the assignment. That's like creating the universe to make apple pie. Not a teacher, but in college I was in a classical mythology class, and we had to read The Metamorphoses by Ovid, an ancient text which puts together a bunch of myths into a cohesive story. Instead, some kid in my class read The Metamorphoses by Kafka, a 1914 short story about a guy who turns into a cockroach. Before class I overheard him talking to his friends. "Yeah, I actually did the whole reading, but why did we have to read it for this class? Dude just turns into a bug. It was weird." Not a teacher, but the student. When I was in my first year of college, my writing class assignment was to write an objective essay regarding Dr. King's movement. Being an idiot, and not thinking clearly, I thought the professor meant to be objective, similar to a lawyer objecting something during a court case. In the end, I wrote a completely racist paper and received a 0. I had to explain myself to the dean the next day as well. I still cringe every time I think about that class. I was teaching a college history class and the students were assigned a book called Lieutenant None, about a woman who fled Spain for the New World dressed as a man and lived the rest of her life as a man. It's about 100 pages and takes about an hour to read if you are focused. One of my students bought the book online from half.com or something like that, and ended up reading 300 pages of dense feminist philosophy about gender roles in the 16th century. If nothing else, he had some very interesting contributions to our discussion that day. Told my students to write the essay question at the top of their page. Fully half the class wrote the essay question. I had an English teacher that would frequently do dictation for that entire class period. Way too many kids in our class would literally write down ellipsis, semicolon, parentheses, hyphen, etc. before they realized they were punctuation marks and not words. This was in 12th grade. To be fair, if said kids actually knew how to spell hyphen, or parentheses, for that matter, I'd be impressed. The same kind of impressed as Ron Burgundy was when Baxter ate a whole wheel of cheese, despite having pooped in the refrigerator. In my science class, we started a project where they had to make a poster of a cell analogy that they came up with. For example, someone made a city because the town hall is like the nucleus, a power plant is like the mitochondria, etc. One girl just could not come up with anything. I gave her a bunch of examples and then let her think about it. When I came back to check on her, she said, "I'm making a sandwich." I was like, okay, but that might be kind of tough. Did you think about the parts of the sandwich that match up with cell organelles? What is the mitochondria of a sandwich? She was like, okay, I'll pick something else. I get back to get a few minutes later and I asked her, and now she's making a taco. I explained the same thing. Over the course of 2 days, while most other students started drawing, she suggested a British phone booth, a cell phone, Sonic the Hedgehog, a pizza, and a Taco Bell. For each suggestion, I said that she could do it as long as she matched each part to an organelle, and she'd say, "Oh yeah," because she forgot that I wasn't just letting her draw random stuff. Near the end of the period on Friday, I went to her and said, "Look, let me help you. Draw an island," and I explained half of the organelles for her and even started sketching stuff out. She nodded and agreed to do that. Today, I gave her a poster board and then went to check on her. She said she didn't want to do the island and started drawing a bowling alley, with random parts labeled as organelles without even thinking about the functions. I don't even care anymore. Everyone knows that the queso is the powerhouse of the taco. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.